Starting at the top of my list, De'Von Achane, 40% rostered, and a guy that is clearly going to be worth 100% of your fab. Just like we said with Jerome Ford, just like we said with Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams, there's going to be a guy that you have to blow the money on many weeks. This is definitely one of those weeks. Oh, excuse me. We talked about this offense as a whole, just unstoppable speed and space. It is what Mike McDaniels values and loves, and De'Von Achane fits the bill completely for what Mike McDaniels wants to do. It was kind of curious that he hadn't unleashed him, given how perfect this fit was. One of the fastest backs to ever come out of college. He's small, shifty, ultimately was getting goal line work despite all of that, and racks up 18 carries, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 catches, 30 yards, and another 2 scores. Typically, you don't have running backs that put up 50 fantasy points out there on your waiver wire. So monster day for De'Von Achane. And that, again, as we talked about earlier, still had Mostert put up 4 touchdowns as well. So just a very impressive overall performance from this ground game. Jeff Wilson will return at some point, but I can't imagine the cat's out of the bag at this point. This is going to be a De'Von Achane, Raheem Mostert. I think Jeff Wilson, only if an injury suffers by either of those first two, should he be relevant again. So definitely one guy you want to look at. Again, 100% or so of the fab. I can't imagine someone's going to overtake him as my number one guy. Number 2, Truth, you know who my guy's going to be.
He's going to be Tank Dell, and he's 30% owned. And there have already been people in the comments like giving you a lot of positive comments because you were all over this. You've been hyping the guy up. You were right. He caught 5 out of 7 targets for $145. I know we talked about it before, but for purpose of who the waiver clip and everything else, we got to repeat it. And it's worth repeating because it's pretty incredible. I did actually see the 68-yard pass from CJ Stroud that he caught, which was also pretty impressive. He led the team in targets for the second straight week, and he had 5 receptions for the second straight game. Nico Collins, Robert Woods, Tank Dell, they're all seeing pretty high volume from Stroud. And, the Texans offense is a lot more fantasy relevant than either one of us thought it would be. And, you're going to play him on your team over. Who'd you say you're playing him over?
Oh, man. Garrett Wilson, probably moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So anyway, that's the deal with Tank Dell. If not for, our first guy, the Miami rookie who just went insane, he'd almost certainly be the top guy.
Absolutely. Jayden Reed, also another guy to look at the waiver wire, as is Luke Musgrave. We'll bring them both up. 6 of 8 catches for Luke Musgrave, 48 yards for him, just barely missing out, like a 50-yard bomb down the seam, misconnection from Jordan Love. 44 pass attempts for Jordan Love, though. Good overall volume, and we did see Reed trail only Romeo Doubs, who is also out there, and right now 53% of leagues, Romeo Doubs. Go look for him first. But Jayden Reed, seeing 7 targets, ultimately hauling in 3 of them, 63-yard day. Not a humongous day, but yet another nice, efficient performance, dominating out of the slot for Jayden Reed. So good to see for him. And we mentioned Tyjae Spears already. Not a ton of stats to talk about here, but just the fact that he outsnapped Derrick Henry. It goes to show you game flow could really end up giving Tyjae Spears the key to this backfield many weeks, more than we expected to. 4 targets this week. He's an explosive guy. We've seen multiple touchdown runs in that early preseason. Loved him in college. Great athlete. You had those concerns over the knees and whether they'll hold up, but for right now, he's looking phenomenal. I like Tyjae Spears. Definitely more of a stash than those first 3 guys who can start right away. But Tyjae Spears has so much handcuff upside, and that playoff schedule gets the Texans twice. Maybe, just maybe, worth a hold all season there.
We talked about Marvin Mims earlier. He's 26% owned. The stats, they're impressive as far as like his average per catch, stuff like that. He got 3 receptions on 5 targets, 73 yards. That's impressive in itself. He also had an amazing punt return. The guy can really fly. His snap count, not super encouraging, but it is interesting to note that basically, although he was only in on 25% of the snaps, they threw him the ball like half the time when he was in. So that can't be ignored. Clearly, he's somebody that when he's in the game, he's a factor. You got to pay attention to him on defense, and his athleticism is just incredible. And Russ did pass for over 300 yards, even though they got absolutely humiliated today. And you quoted the Scott Barrett tweet where he talked about the longest gains of the 2023 season. Is it Mims like 5 out of the 7 of them, something like that?
Yep, 60 yards, 53 yards, 45 yards, 38 yards, and 30 yards. 5 of those 7 longest gains belong to Mims. And again, playing about 20% of the snaps so far this year. But when he's in, he's getting targets. It's just a matter of time before the role gets elevated. And sure, he won't maintain this efficiency of like 45% air yards on just 16% of the snaps like we have seen but he's that much of a baller. I can't wait to see
Sure.
him get more usage here. One of the more exciting things, and like you said, back-to-back now 300-yard days for Russ Wilson. So yeah, it's gross and it's Russell Wilson, but it's actually going okay because the defense is so bad and they're constantly chasing points. So Marvin Mims makes a lot of sense. Those were all guys we've talked about on the show before. We haven't really brought up Rashee Rice at all. Second on the team behind only Travis Kelce, though, this week in targets. Rashee Rice doesn't end up getting huge numbers, 5 catches, 59 yards, but just barely missing a touchdown, getting tackled on the 1-yard line. They ended up pounding it in. But Pacheco will play later. But right around, I do want to see what these snap counts end up being. We'll definitely be live Tuesday. I go live right around 8 p.m. every Tuesday for a more in-depth waiver wire show where we'll dive into more snap counts. We'll dive into more pickups. So if you haven't seen that show, definitely come on. It's a great crowd. We get a bunch of questions for that one. But Rashee Rice, definitely going to dive into him a bit more. But very intrigued by this performance. And we were just talking about the Broncos, Jaleel McLaughlin. This is deeper leagues because I get a ton of those like, 20% owned. These guys are never – you know how tough the waiver wire guys are, Truth. They don't get any tougher.
They're like DiCaprio in The Revenant.
Exactly. Like, how have you made it through life in such grizzled leagues? I don't know. They make sure to remind every single person on Twitter how tough their league is. But 2 running backs that are probably out there in those leagues, Jaleel McLaughlin and Melvin Gordon. The only reason to bring Melvin Gordon up, this corpse of Melvin Gordon, is that we got an injury to Gus Edwards. Justice Hill also has turf toe. So by default, we might get Melvin Gordon more often than anybody'd expect in 2023. But you jotted down his stats, Truth. They weren't so bad, right? What was his final numbers?
They weren't great. I mean, it was like, I want to say it was like 10 rushes for 32 yards and maybe 2 catches for a little over 20. So if you played Melvin Gordon, you got 5 or 6 fantasy points.
55 total yards on 12 touches, 2 catches. So it wasn't you weren't playing Melvin Gordon. He's 1% rostered, so no one was playing him. Nobody was really rostering him. It's more so the fact that he might be the last man up at this point if Gus Edwards remains in protocol, if that turf toe lingers. And then next week they got the Browns, though. Not a great matchup coming up. We just seen this team shut down Derrick Henry. So unless it lingered into the Pittsburgh matchup, I don't even know that you really want to use Melvin Gordon. Jaleel McLaughlin as well. We just wanted to talk about how he out-touched Samaje Perine. Perine did play 5 more total snaps. But McLaughlin, we've already seen him score a touchdown already on this early season. He was a touchdown machine throughout the early preseason this year. He's the all-time leading yards gainer in college football at the running back position. So that was impressive stuff. But if you want a more high upside stash, I wanted to give a couple, real deep league guys. But I did want to mention Quentin Johnston, an absolute monster at TCU. So he'd be well above those guys. In fact, if this injury is going to be serious for Mike Williams, I think Quentin Johnston, I just put a 9 because he's the 9th name I thought of. As I dive into the injuries, though, Quentin Johnston, 32% rostered. So out there in a decent amount of leagues, got cut by a lot of people. If Mike Williams, this injury looks as bad as I think it was, you got the towel over the head, getting carted off, you're grabbing at the knee, could barely put any pressure on it. He's going to have to step up, and he's going to have to step up fast. And Brandon Staley, I think he's kind of a bozo, but he did say he loves this kid when he's scouting TCU versus Bama. This was the best player that popped off to him, and he can get it done after the catch, big body, long vertical speed. He kind of just has a lot of Mike Williams' skill set, but a little bit smoother after the catch, maybe not so dominant at the point of attack as Mike Williams, but brings a lot to the table. So I'm very, very intrigued. We've seen how high-powered this offense is. Look no further than earlier today with 400 yards from Justin Herbert. So definitely go look. Quentin Johnston could be stepping into a huge role, and Josh Palmer, for that matter, already the second receiver. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.